Okay. With enough time watching various things that are going on, noting the shape of the news cycle for the weekend, the fact that there is a shaping of the news cycle for the weekend. Either the president has spontaneously become everything that the far left has insisted that he is the entire time, even though, if you've been paying attention, he hasn't been that. Either he's suddenly become that, or it's a ruse. But I haven't seen a resolution to like the Elon beef that happened. So I don't know, to what extent it's theatrical and to what extent it's just opportunism. But definitely treating it the way that he has, the president has brought more attention to it, has riled more people up, and has done so like twice now. But I want to note something. It is possible for two things to be true at the same time. It is possible for him to be trying to stop pushing the issue because it turns out that, okay, when they say a country in the Middle East, I think there's two countries in the Middle East that Epstein had dealings with. And I say this because there's been kind of a weird contradiction that I've noticed when it comes to a couple of countries in the Middle East that claim to be enemies with each other, but every single foreign policy thing that they decide on, every move that they make, both of these supposedly at odds countries are basically acting in the same interests. So on one hand, there are other operatives trafficking in minors than just Epstein. And some of these operators, I think, are not just servicing Israel, but Saudi Arabia. And that if the real exposure of all of this stuff was to come out, the international politics and economic consequences here would be severe, to be sure. And I'm not saying that that means it's okay, because it's not. I don't know what they're going to do. They might be in a stuck position. This is one where I think if Trump puts on enough of a show of saying, I'll just let it go, and nobody lets it go, you get a number of things come out in the open. One, if they're paying attention, the people that are of the far left or progressive persuasion that have stayed on that side, even now, will realize that the MAGA base are not a bunch of good Germans. They're not a bunch of Nazis. They are not mindlessly following him in cult fashion. He's been saying what they agree with, and they've been going with him. And now that he's saying something that they don't agree with, they're not just going with him. None of them. Nobody is. I don't think I know a single person who is remotely aware of what that whole situation with Epstein is about. On any level, just the fact that there was a guy that had his island and there was a president or two and a prince and all this and something about minors, underage girls. Oh, wow. And usually those people are just kind of like, yeah, it figures. I don't get too deep into it because those people are a bunch of scumbags, and that's just proof. That's kind of the way it was with a lot of people that I know. And anybody else that was more interested in that topic, that dug any deeper and found anything else out and understood to some extent, whether at the surface level or all the way down toward the bottom, how far the rabbit hole goes. Nobody is letting this go. And I think they know they'd have to be blind and stupid, which to this point they haven't been. They would have to be in order to be doing this unironically, which means it's got to be some kind of a show. So the more we put it out and the more we say, hey, but we want answers, and the more he says, oh, just let it go. It's nothing to see here, folks. And he's doing it in a way that is obvious. So you've got people that have Trump derangement syndrome, which is to say that's not a real legit diagnosis. A real legit diagnosis would be some type of complex post-traumatic stress disorder and dissociation causing them to have a permanent triggerable alter ego that takes over to defend the worldview that they have been instilled with. That is more close to an actual diagnosis than Trump derangement. It's possible to derange somebody in the same way about something completely unrelated. So stop putting his name on it. But the people with this propagandistic demoralization derangement will still be forced to see that all these people that they thought were evil for following this dude are going to be like, yeah, no, we're not down with that. We want this answer too. Secondly, him being so ironically dismissive of it is going to make all of these people demand it, to the point that either of those Middle Eastern countries, that if they were to withdraw from our economy, if they were to... So basically, it's like this. There is a function of Israel in the Middle East of being close enough to keep tabs on all these other countries where, honestly, all the terrorism comes from. And if it isn't something that is generated by our government operating to overthrow another leader through regime change by starting radicalism, and then these radical people, once they take over, stay radicalized and decide they want to come after us, or they figure out that it was us pulling the strings and then they really want to come after us, the only thing we can do is stay the fuck out of the Middle East. But without a country like Israel in place there that isn't quite of the same thing, there's someone to kind of keep tabs on these different hotbeds for terrorism. So that's necessary. The Saudi angle is that if they were to withdraw from our stock market by liquidating every asset that they own in our economy's value would drop by over a third. Everything would crash, and then they subsequently could stop using the petrodollar and switch to some other petro currency, which would then tank our economy further. So yes, in fact, our entire society, as we know it right now, our country, kind of depends on having those two fuckhead countries operating. But the problem is, the political corruption in Israel is something to behold. Not only that, but there are things that their government is doing that are actively trying to portray as if the apocalypse is happening for the purpose of triggering the coming of their version of the Messiah. So all this red heifer stuff in the news and everything else, they're building an apocalypse. And the thing is that if you try and force God's hand with the second coming of Christ, that is how you get Antichrist first. Because if you've actually read in, a lot of the stuff talks about the possibility of Antichrist, not the certainty of Antichrist. But if you want one, that's how you do it. They are trying to force God's hand. Then, when it comes to the Saudis, it turns out their royal family are murderers and pederasts. They got a thing for the youngins. All of them, apparently. So, that's an issue, too. So, who were Epstein and Maxwell trafficking to, besides a handful of famous people? Royals at various different countries. and collecting propaganda on behalf of at least Israel, or not propaganda, compromat, I should say. I keep doing that. Collecting compromising blackmail material on behalf of a country who keeps tabs on the terrorists and simultaneously is going to cause World War III just so that God will show up. But those countries, both of them, because they kind of have us by the short and curlies, try telling us what to do all the time. They got us by the economy. They got us by the Bible. And they probably got blackmail material on a lot of people in our government. But even if their biggest ally, number one representative, someone who may very well end up eventually at some point attempting to put Israel first before America as an American president, is going to come to a point where he says, look, man, you told me to tell him to stop. I told him to stop. They all, 100% of them said, fuck you, do it anyway. What am I supposed to do, man? They elected me. I got to do it. That's what he's going to say. He's going to be forced to release it. There's going to be drastic economic consequences. Certainly, BRICS becomes a much, much more powerful petromagnate in that time. Russia's energy monopoly will skyrocket. China will get into the industry. We will be able to do our own for our own continent because of the reserves we have. But that may also involve annexing Canada. But we're talking World War III. So the problem is we cannot, under any circumstances, continue to live in a world where we know that things like that are happening. Trafficking of minors to these elites, letting them get away with it. Meanwhile, we get fined until we can't afford to live. We're stuck, beholden to laws that other people feel like or are demonstrably not required to obey. And the very principle, the basis on which our entire system of government is literally founded has to do with revolting against that. That's where we stand with it. That's why it matters. That's why it's such a big deal. And I know I keep repeating a lot of this stuff, but I'm watching this and it's like, yeah, there's some kind of an act going on or an attempt to cover and make it look like it was all on purpose. But I mean, clearly, two things are going to become obvious in America real fucking quick if they haven't already. Number one, Trump's supporters are not a mindless cult. Anyone who supported him because he was doing things that they wanted to see happen. And once we get to that point where there's not doing that anymore, they're going to stop following him. And it's not that you're not going to shame a bunch of people that were only ad hoc supporters because they watched the other political extreme completely tear down the most popular candidate before we all realized that guy was controlled opposition and full of shit as well. So this is the thing, is we're like, wait a minute. So let me get back to what I was saying 10 minutes ago about more than one thing can be possible at the same time and true. He is attempting to cover up this ultra important Epstein shit. And at the same time, people are making fun of him for, oh, you need to let that Epstein guy go. That's not such a big deal. Let's focus on 2020 instead. But here's the thing. 2020 was a bullshit election. There was problems. Biden was not fairly and cleanly elected. And the simple fact, if you were actually paying attention and not just reading headlines and believing the hype, becoming one of those super lefty, brainwashed and propaganda demoralized, deranged people that cannot think for yourself. Because that's what it is. Those people, they can't think anymore. They cannot think. That has been locked off. They are told what to think and they go with it. They are not just mindlessly, or like they think, they project onto the MAGA base, the America First people, about how they're blindly loyal to Trump. No. The America First people are not blindly loyal to Trump. But the people that are accusing them of that have become blindly loyal to whatever they're told to believe in because they have been captured, right? So the thing is, unless you're one of those morons, those victims, you know 2020 was not on the level. It was not above board. And we can also remember, cannot continue to operate in a society and a government founded on certain principles where those principles are upended now. They didn't let any of the relevant cases into court to the point of discovery, to the point of hearings for motions. All they said was, you don't have standing, to someone who filed beforehand saying, we think this is going to happen. And then after the fact, people that also filed, they said, sorry, you don't have standing because you didn't file early. But the file early people were told you didn't have standing because you didn't file in the moment. It's bullshit. It's as good as nothing to see here, folks. Move along. Were we still talking about this? Why are we still talking about this? That's what they said about the elections too. So the thing is, you can't not expose the elite ring of child trafficking and worse. There's a lot of bad stuff in the world that needs to stop. But until we all say, hey, wait a minute, this is going on though, everyone has to understand that. But the systems of elections, pretty much all the countries, are also fixed at this point. I've known that for a long time, and nobody would listen because they were programmed not to listen. So more than one thing can be true at the same time. Trump appears to be, although may not actually be, dropping the ball when it comes to Epstein. But also, he's also correct that the 2020 election was broken. We have done precisely fuck all to fix any of those problems. 2022 and 2024 have happened in the meantime. But 2024, he only got in, I think, because so many people came in and did it, and we were watching them like hawks, that they were not able to do what they did in 2020 and 2022. Doesn't mean that they won't be able to do it again in 2026 if nothing is done in the meantime. So that's important too. That is ultra important too. We cannot have a two-tier justice system with the ultra-rich elites allowed to do the most depraved and fucked up shit. And we cannot have a system where all of those same people are just elected in a sham pretense of choice to keep the rest of us docile, pacified, and in line. And rest assured, there are certainly going to be more circumstances or situations like that, scenarios of completely unacceptable stuff. Simply no more. Simply no more. And then on top of that, we got them wackadoo creeps, weirdos, and scumbags in the Middle East working on World War III because they want God to show up. God's been here the whole time. Those people aren't paying attention. That's what it is. So, yeah, that's where we stand. That's what it is right now. This is Sunday afternoon, the 13th of July, 2025. And in this year, we have yet to see the exposure of the elite degenerates. We have yet to see the downfall of corrupt governments. We have yet to see the fixing of a broken election system. We have yet to see any semblance of the world that we claim to live in.